Tigrai campaign. For 2 years now, our enemies have committed inconceivable atrocities on our families while tarnishing our culture, referring to our families as animals, and looting our precious historical sites. By means of complete communication blockout, blocked humanitarian aid, and denial of life-saving medication, the joint government forces have managed to decimate Tigray, barraging our innocent children and their mothers, treading fast on the genocidal path towards extinction of our nation. At a moment in time where our very own and fellow African brothers and sisters, together with the international community, have turned a blind eye, Tigray government and their forces, Tigray diaspora and their resilience, allies and their rampant display of support, fighting together, have turned plight into power, becoming a compelling opponent with a lot of influence and ability. Cut off from their opulence, denied of their right to prosperity, and left to fend for themselves. The enemies, while exacting extreme vengeance, have made it clear they have no intention of settling before completing their mission of total annihilation. Beloved Tagaru and our cherished allies, now more than ever, Tigray is calling. It's up to all of us around the world to seize the perpetuation of a genocide by coming together for what we pray will be the last time to amplify our plight and help liberate our nation with Save Tigray campaign. As the second-year commemoration of an ongoing genocide fast approaches, let's all gather this weekend in Washington, D.C. to be the outlet for the silenced voices back home in the most vulnerable nation worldwide. Tigray Tisser.
Hello and welcome for all of you who are tuned in. You're watching TMH and this is our English Daily News. Our headlines for today: the interest of the people of Tigray is said to be at the center of implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement that took place in Pretoria, South Africa. UN Commission says probe into an accountability over all violations during the conflict in northern Ethiopia is critical, and analysts shed light on challenges in implementing the cessation of hostilities agreement. As we move on to our main updates for today, the interest of the people of Tigray is said to be at the center of the implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement. Tigray Bureau of Communications Affairs today issued a statement on the signing of the permanent cessation of hostilities agreement between the government of Tigray and Ethiopia's federal government. Tigray Bureau of Communications Affairs said the government of Tigray signed the agreement to ensure the interests of the people of Tigray and safeguard its security sustainably, and that it will work towards the implementation as well. According to the statement, the provision of the agreement ensuring restoration of the constitutional order and the respect for the Constitution should be considered a cardinal victory. The people and the government of Tigray were forced into the war 2 years ago due to the violation of their constitutional rights, not because of the war that they chose themselves. As the statement said, it added that people in the government of Tigray have before and have after the start of the war been demanding that the constitution be respected. The statement noted that the people in the government of Tigray have for a long time been confronting this war imposed on them by the Ethiopian government, which failed to respond positively to these demands. In the agreement signed in South Africa on Wednesday, both sides have taken common positions to uphold the constitution and the constitutional order. This is basically our demand, the Bureau said, adding that its implementation requires further talks. The statement stated that whatever agreement the government of Tigray enters into and whatever action it takes will be to ensure the interests of the people of Tigray and not endanger its existence further. The statement disclosed that the government of Tigray will give the detailed explanations on the provisions of this agreement in the coming days. Tigray forces have accused the Ethiopian government and their allies in the attacks of the peace deal. The spokesman for the Tigray forces said that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government had carried out attacks against civilians in the Tigrayan city of Macho on Thursday. Kendeya ገብረሕይወት said on his Twitter account, quoting sources at Lemlem Karl Hospital, that an Ethiopian drone has attacked civilians. He also added that there was also shelling of artillery in the same city that killed and wounded several civilians. This happens after the signing of the peace agreement in Pretoria, he said. Access to northern Ethiopia is severely restricted, and Tigray has been under communication blackout for more than a year now. There was no immediate response from the Ethiopian government officials or the African Union to the requests for the AFP. Through the agreement signed on Wednesday, both sides agreed to permanently silence the guns, but observers say that the key details and clear roadmap that would help sustain momentum are absent and the distrust runs deep. Ethiopia's northernmost region has been in the throes of severe humanitarian crisis due to the lack of food, medicine, complete blockout of access to basic needs and services as well. Observers and diplomats have warned of the difficult road ahead, with the EU's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, on Friday, saying that arriving at a permanent ceasefire was going to be extremely difficult. The UN rights and their experts say that commissions investigating all violations committed during the conflict in northern Ethiopia and are holding those responsible to account is critical. The UN Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia said that the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement by Ethiopia's warring parties is an important first step towards ending a conflict that has had devastating impact on civilians, particularly in the Tigray region. The Commission welcomed the expressed commitments to human rights, unhindered humanitarian aid and access, protection of civilians and accountability as well, and urged the immediate resumption of full and unfettered humanitarian access and the restoration of basic services to the entire Tigray region. The Commission also welcomes commitments to the cessation of hostilities propaganda and rhetoric as well as hate speech. The Commission underscored the critical importance of ensuring that all violations committed during the conflict, including those that have occurred since the resumption of fighting in August 2022, are investigated and those responsible are held to account. The Commission said it is committed to impartially exercising its adversary as well as the adversary of mandate as it pertains to the matters relating to the justice, accountability, reconciliation, and healing. The UK welcomes the signing of the cessation of hostilities as well, and that the agreement between the Ethiopian government and Tigray's ruling party is a great sign. The UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office spokesperson, in the statements issued on the second-year anniversary of the war, called the agreement an important step towards peace. The statement commended the signatories for their choices and the ending of the devastating two-year-long conflict. The statement also added that it is now crucial all parties in Ethiopia, with support from its friends in the international community, move to implement this agreement immediately. Most critically, humanitarian aid must be urgently delivered to all of those in conflict-affected areas, as they stated in their release. The UK also expressed its readiness to support any type of recovery for the conflict-affected areas as well. In other news, analysts shed light on the challenges in the implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement. Gabra Christos Gabraselassie, who's the founder and chief editor of TechHad.com, mentioned the deceptive track record of the Ethiopian government and the AU's lack of monitoring capacity has cast a shadow to whether the agreement will actually hold.
The track record of the African Union, the Ethiopian regime are not really that good. The regime really thrives on deception, so that doesn't give me so much hope. And the African Union does not have really a strong mechanism, to enforce this, to oversee this process.
Martin Plott, senior researcher fellow at the Commonwealth Studies Institute, responding to the question on what led the two parties to sign this agreement, he had this to say.
Well, I think there are two things to say. The first is both sides were under intense pressure. The Tigrayans were certainly under intense pressure because the Eritrean and Ethiopian forces were deep inside their territory, but they were not close to Mekelle. They were actually blocked quite a distance from Mekelle and were held and being ambushed all the time on the B30, which was called the highway to hell. So it wasn't as if the Tigrayans were in an impossible position, but they were in an extremely difficult position.
But they made quite a lot of concessions. How do you explain them making the concessions they made?
Well, let me just give you the difficulty that the Ethiopians were under. Not only were they losing a lot of men, but also they were under intense financial pressure because the International Monetary Fund made it clear they would not extend loans to Ethiopia, which is down to about a month's worth of foreign exchange. They've spent hugely on weapons for this war. And so they were under intense pressure as well. And it's because both sides were under pressure that it was possible to get some kind of agreement, I think.
Martin Plott said the concrete confidence-building measures have been taken to address that the existing lack of trust among the parties. He said this to continue.
I think there's very little trust, but what you need is, confidence-building measures. And, you can ask yourself one simple question. Have the borders of Tigray been opened? Have the World Food Programme's trucks begun moving today? There's no reason why they have to wait any further. The agreement's been initialed. They should be moving today. The second question is this. Will the Ethiopian and the Eritrean governments allow reporters from Al Jazeera, from other organizations, to go up to the front and report on what is going on?
Right.
That would be hugely important in allowing people to say, this is what's happening with some confidence.
That concludes our news for today. Before we leave, another public service announcement, as this is the second-year commemoration weekend taking place here in Washington, D.C. as we commemorate the second year of the ongoing Tigray genocide. For those of you who are tuned in and are in the D.C. area, make sure you guys continue to come out and participate in all of the demonstrations that we have planned for you for this weekend. And you may have also seen and watched our network today as we went live and showed you the protesters walking down in D.C. during the day, and that continues throughout the weekend as well in the video that follows for more information. That wraps up our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Save Tigray campaign. For 2 years now, our enemies have committed inconceivable atrocities on our families while tarnishing our culture, referring to our families as animals, and looting our precious historical sites. By means of complete communication blockout, blocked humanitarian aid, and denial of life-saving medication, the joint government forces have managed to decimate Tigray, barraging our innocent children and their mothers, treading fast on the genocidal path towards extinction of our nation. At a moment in time where our very own and fellow African brothers and sisters, together with the international community, have turned a blind eye, Tigray government and their forces, Tigray diaspora and their resilience, allies and their rampant display of support, fighting together, have turned plight into power, becoming a compelling opponent with a lot of influence and ability. Cut off from their opulence, denied of their right to prosperity, and left to fend for themselves. The enemies, while exacting extreme vengeance, have made it clear they have no intention of settling before completing their mission of total annihilation. Beloved Tagaru and our cherished allies, now more than ever, Tigray is calling. It's up to all of us around the world to seize the perpetuation of a genocide by coming together for what we pray will be the last time to amplify our plight and help liberate our nation with Save Tigray campaign. As the second-year commemoration of an ongoing genocide fast approaches, let's all gather this weekend in Washington, D.C. to be the outlet for the silenced voices back home in the most vulnerable nation worldwide. Tigray Tisser.